Summer might be winding down. Yeah, it's getting to the fall and a little bit cooler. So we're going to keep it warm for you. We've got NBA hot takes, LeBron James, Ben Simmons, the Nets, the Bulls. We're going to cover it all in the Wednesday episode of Locked On NBA. Let's go.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Locked On NBA, the daily podcast covering everything you want to know about the association. 5 days a week, every day, free for you all. No paywall or anything like that. We're your one-stop shop for everything going on around the association. And on Wednesdays, I'm your co-host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and the host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
And I'm John Karalis at RedsArmy_John on Twitter. And I host Locked On Celtics.
So I love the idea of today's show. I love this. It's like the end of summer. There's nothing going on in the NBA unless you're Rasheed Wallace wanting to say some crazy stuff out there. So let's take a cue from Sheed here and go with some of the hottest takes. And for those who don't know what he said, he basically said Kevin Durant and LeBron James wouldn't have been good in his era, even though LeBron James played in his era and tore it up. So I don't know who he was expecting them to be, but those are some pretty hot takes. So let's have our own hot takes here on, I guess what, you've got a big one you just want to start off with, because I very much disagree with it. So let's just kind of jump into this one.
Well, look, I'm channeling my inner Kendrick Perkins. Like the whole concept of the hot take is, because we're not a hot takey show. This is not who we normally are. So I'm taking things that I'm like, maybe, and just committing to them full Kendrick Perkins style. So my first hot take, going all in on this, LeBron James is, in fact, the washed king. He's done. His career is on a downward slope, and we're going to start seeing things go poorly for him quickly.
So you think that's like this year, right? Like this is where like the cliff, he's at the cliff and he's like falling down, or I guess rolling down the cliff right now.
I'm so bad at hot takes. No, I don't actually believe that. But for the purposes of this, yes. No, you know what? Let's say yes. You don't forget it. I do believe it. I think the injuries have started to catch up with LeBron James. I think he doesn't have a whole lot of help over there. There are a lot of big names that don't do big things anymore. That team is generally flawed. That Russell Westbrook thing is going to take a long time to figure out. So not all of it is going to be because he's actually washed. I think that LeBron James is going to struggle to mesh with Russell Westbrook. I think the trade for Russell Westbrook was an admission by the Lakers that they need somebody to take the pressure off of LeBron James, because he can't do everything he used to do anymore. And so that's why I think we're entering the next phase of LeBron. So you want to go hot take? You can say, yeah, washed king is coming up, because he's not going to be able to play as much. He's not going to be able to handle the ball as much, which means he's going to be a lot more standing around. It's going to be a lot more picking his spots. So when he does do things, they're going to be great, but he's just not going to be able to play the way he used to. And I think the Lakers are actually going to be disappointing this season.
Okay, so you convinced me more than I was expecting you were going to do it. And I guess it's like, that was actually like, I'll give you some credit here. That was well done, because I was ready to come in and do what I always do when people try and tell me LeBron is washed. Look, we've heard this, every year for the past half a decade at this point, right? He's 36 now. I think we started hearing this when he was like 32 or something like that. And look, one of these days, the person who's like, oh, you're going to bet on 34-year-old LeBron James, they keep doing that. Then it's, you're going to bet on 35-year-old LeBron James, after he keeps doing it every single year. So because of his track record, like, no, he's not washed. He's still going to be an amazing player next year. I actually started to talk myself into them adding Russell Westbrook onto the Lakers, but that could just be the summer heat getting to me still, because it's hot where I am. Look, he at his age last year, 25 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. Those are still pretty incredible numbers, but you're right. They're actually down from what they were before. The year before that, he averaged 10.2 assists, so it's down over 2. There's maybe something to it, but like, this dude is still putting up all NBA numbers at his age. And if it's like he's washed, he's not doing that anymore, like, no, not a damn chance. 1 year that statement will be correct. I just am not going to believe that person who claims it saw it actually happening ahead of time.
Yeah, no, and I'm just kind of banking on my actual take is that LeBron is actually he's going to have I think a tougher season than anticipated. And I'm just looking at this roster. Like I said before, Westbrook is going to be a tough fit. Westbrook doesn't immediately gel with teammates. And you go down like Gasol is now we're getting into the washed group. Gasol, Carmelo, Dwight, Ariza, Rondo, those guys, they are counting on like this group 8 years ago. Wow, super team. This group right now is kind of trash, and I think that because he's going to be asked to cover for these guys, but he can't play the point guard as much as he used to. I don't know how. I just don't know how this is going to pan out. I think, and the other thing is that the injuries have started to catch up with him just a tiny bit, and this is where he's 36. I think his body will start to betray him a little bit more. Some of the nagging stuff. How many times has LeBron over the course of his career gotten hurt or sprained an ankle, and then all of a sudden he kind of almost like willed himself back into a game? I think those moments are going to go away. I think what's going to end up happening is those moments where he rolls an ankle are going to lead to 2, 3, 4 missed games or maybe more. I think all of those little nicks, those little the bumps, the bruises that he used to be able to just kind of brush off, I don't think he's able to brush them off quite the same. And I think if he does, they pile up and they lead to something else. So as the old cliche goes, Father Time is undefeated. And maybe it takes a little longer in this match. Maybe this one will go the full 12 rounds. But at some point here, I think we're in round 9 or 10 here. My hot take is that LeBron is washed. My actual take is that LeBron is we're starting to see the LeBron signs of age. And I don't think this team is going to do him any favors at all. And I think a lot of this has to do with team construction that's going to exacerbate whatever issues that he has.
Yeah, so it's something that's compounding on itself. And look, he said it to a degree himself, right? Like he said, I'm never going to be fully healthy again. So in a sense, he's kind of admitting to some of what you're trying to claim. So from that perspective, I really don't disagree with you. It's just kind of, to me, he's the exception to these rules, right?
Sure.
Same thing with like Popovich and the Spurs, right? I'm just never going to count that team out. Maybe this year, finally. But in general, even when they didn't look all that good, you wouldn't count them out, right? Because they were a Popovich team and like they were going to probably get into the playoffs or be right there. Even in the bubble year, right? Where they didn't make it, they came closer than I think anyone was expecting from that. So until it actually happens to LeBron James, I'm not saying it. Then the second he actually has a washed season, which for the reasons you lay out could be this year, then I'm gonna be like, oh, dude's totally washed, and kind of just piggyback on it after the fact, I think. There you go. Let us know. We're on YouTube now. Don't forget, subscribe there if you haven't, if you're just listening to the podcast form, and let us know in the comments, which we can be checking, and let us know if you think LeBron James is washed or not. So coming up next, a little bit of Ben Simmons talk. Is he a good player or not? I think we've got, at least I've got a hot take on that one still. And talk about the Bulls maybe being disappointing and the Brooklyn Nets potentially disappointing as well. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by the SweatBlock antiperspirant wipes. It's still hot outside in many parts. And you know what? Sweating is just an awful thing. You don't want that, whether you're doing it in a presentation, on a first date, God forbid, whatever it is. You don't need to be looking at your shirt, being self-conscious about how you're feeling, anything like that. And that's where the SweatBlock antiperspirant wipes come in. They're stronger and more effective than most clinical antiperspirants, and they're doctor-created, doctor-recommended. And they're super simple to use, plus they work for 7 days. You just wipe them on, go to sleep, shower the next morning, you're good to go. 7 days, not needing to do anything else. Plus, they're tested by firefighters on the Rachel Ray Show. They've been a bestseller on Amazon for the past 10 years, where they have over 13,000 reviews. And if you want to give these things a try and not worry anymore about just sweating too much, you can go use the promo code Locked On for 20% off at SweatBlock.com. Again, that is 20% off at SweatBlock.com when you use the promo code Locked On, or you can check them out at Amazon or CVS.
Tell me if this sounds familiar to you. You got one device where you watch the game live, you stream your favorite shows on another, you're watching the sports highlights on your phone, and you're stealing somebody's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and it's a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings you live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, shows, all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no more needing to buy another device ever again. And the best part, no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
All right. It's the Wednesday edition of the Locked On NBA podcast. Free daily show, no paywall or anything like that, covering everything you want to know about the association. Doing hot takes as summer winds down, but we're going to keep you warm. John just had his kind of hot take that LeBron is washed.
The best I can do, man. It's the best I can do.
We're just not hot takey. Like, this
Not
goes against our nature
Can't even pretend.
so much. But I've got one that's like, given current discourse on NBA Twitter, feels like I don't want to put this out there because I just don't want to deal with my mentions. I almost think that's the definition of a hot take, though, right? To some degree?
To some degree. I mean, look, we're bad at hot takes, but we're bringing it right now. This one, we're going full debate show here.
There we go. All right, I've got one for you that's centered around a player, and it's Ben Simmons, who is going to be traded at some point before the season starts. We covered this in last week's show. He is still an all-NBA and really, really good player that a lot of teams, despite his flaws, should be trying to trade for. I think a team like the Kings, where I think he'll end up, should be trying to trade for him. We've heard Cleveland is maybe trying to trade for him. But what about a team like the Charlotte Hornets and pair him with LaMelo Ball or something like that? This is a guy that teams around the league should be coveting for what he can do at his age, and they just are not. And that's where I think we're overthinking it. Yes, shooting is the most important skill you can have in the NBA, and he doesn't do that. I get it. But so many other teams of players that aren't good shooters, they've built the roster around him. Look at Zion Williamson, right? To a certain degree. He doesn't shoot. Ben Simmons does so much else, is an elite defender, still at a young age. This is a guy that teams should be throwing players and pieces for at just 25 years old. He's still an all-NBA guy that teams should try and trade for.
I disagree. I disagree vehemently. I think you're a moron for saying so. Is that how this is supposed to go? No, I do disagree. I do actually disagree. I think Ben Simmons is a lot of the things that you said that he is. However, I haven't seen any notable improvements in Ben Simmons since he's gotten into the league. This has been Ben Simmons from day one. This is going to be Ben Simmons, I think, moving forward. I have a hard time believing that a guy who's been in the league this long now that is going to go out there and make meaningful improvements in his game. He has gigantic flaws that make him difficult to play in the playoffs. All right. He has cost the Sixers multiple series. He alone has cost the Sixers multiple series. You can game plan for him. You can back off of him. You can basically, his defender can go sit in the stands and get some popcorn while he's out there because you know he's not going to shoot, which hurts Joel Embiid. This has been a huge problem for them all along. He's getting paid like a first-team All-NBA guy, and he is not. He's going to win you some regular season games. That's fine. But what does that get you? What does that get you? Nothing. He has come into the league. He has made all-star teams. He's made an all-NBA teams. And that just serves as validation for him not needing to work on his game. He has said it in the past. You know, people ask him about his shooting. He says, hey, I'm still an all-star. That's not the attitude that you want from this guy. That's just not the attitude you want from a guy you're paying like a number one option. He's not a number one option. Yeah, he's gonna improve your defense. He's gonna win you some regular season games. But this isn't a league where that's what you want. I'd rather have a guy who coasts during the regular season and flips it on like playoff Rondo used to do. I would rather have that than have Ben Simmons at this money playing the way that he plays. So as another team, I am not, unless I have the absolute perfect fit around him, I am not adding him to my team.
So let me ask you this, because you mentioned the money, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot. He's going to get paid $31.5 million next season. Is that bad? That's 24th in the league next year. Is that not worth it for him? Is he not a top 25 guy to you?
No, because I'm adding the playoff stuff in there. When you're paying a guy $30+ million, and the same for Tobias Harris. I mean, when you're paying a guy that much money, and look, I'll admit that the numbers are more out of whack than what I might like them to be, and whatever. That's kind of a function of today's NBA and today's salary cap. But still, when you're paying a guy mid $30 million, the last year of his contract in the year 24-25, in that season, $40+ million. That's a guy that I want to step up in the playoffs. It was not like you overpaid to sign a free agent. This is their own guy. They had their own value on him. And it's not like a restricted free agent where you can argue like, well, they had to overpay him. It's not a situation that, they could have gone a different direction here with him. Until he shows you, like you said in the last segment, until LeBron shows you that he's not washed, that I'm just going to believe that this is going to continue. Until Ben Simmons shows me in a playoff series that he's not going to shrink in the moment, then I'm going to believe this. I'm going to believe that he's not worth the money that he's being paid, and he's not worth giving up the level of assets that Daryl Morey is looking for. I think the trade for Ben Simmons is going to be a step down. It's going to be CJ McCollum. It's not going to be Damian Lillard. And that's, I think, the level where Ben Simmons is going to be. Frankly, I hear a lot of people starting to go the other way now because for whatever, I think maybe they feel bad after Doc and Joel Embiid kind of threw him under the bus. And Joel Embiid drove the bus back over him in his latest comments, I think. And I think people want to be like, okay, look, he's still a good player. Yeah, fine. But all of these criticisms of him are legit, and they come through in the biggest moments when the spotlight is on him. I don't care about a November, December, January player. I want the May, June player out there, and he does not play in May or June.
Okay, so that's all fair. I agree with you to an extent with it, right? Like the biggest thing I think you said there is he just hasn't grown as a player, right? Like he over his 4 years, kind of 5 years in the league, nothing's changed. He's been the same player from day one. You're 100% right about that. I don't know, man. Like I look at like LeBron, who didn't really start shooting the 3-ball consistently till year 7, year 8 in his career, and was still capable of. Now he did it significantly better than Ben Simmons did before that, but didn't really develop that to be a huge part of his game until later on. Does a change of scenery just benefit Ben Simmons? And look, if he stays on the 76ers, I'm going to kind of back off of this because that's just the wrong fit. There's a lot of bad blood there. And in the show we did last week, I mean, they basically torched the 76ers to try and get him out of there and kill any of the trade value that he might have had. But a guy that defends at the level that he does, that still shoots at the rim relatively well and can score around the rim pretty efficiently, right? It's not insane Zion numbers that you probably would need from a guy like this, but still 14 points on 10 shot attempts isn't horrible compared to some of the people that we've seen who've been big usage guys. I don't know. He's young. I wonder if a change of scenery is kind of what like makes him kind of get through it, right? Like it's usually like you break up with someone, you go get that like revenge body. Is developing a shot and growing as a player, Ben Simmons' revenge body to a certain degree, right? And is he going to have a lot of motivation to like stick it to Daryl Morey and the 76ers and all of that? I don't know. Like you wouldn't trade Damian Lillard for him. No, I'd easily trade CJ McCollum for him. Even if I were a team that doesn't really need a Ben Simmons and worries maybe about some fit with him in my like top best player, I still probably roll the dice on it because there's still so much talent there. He's so young, and the defense can really help elevate you. Plus, the playmaking's really good. I think that's valuable. You've got to have the right team built around him. But again, for most players, other than maybe 10 in the league, you've got to do something like that. So I'm not as low on his value if the team fits him a little bit more. But certainly the 76ers are not it. And if he stays there, he's going to continue to look as bad as he is and probably like kill everything I'm saying here.
Well, I mean, I think there's one fit out there that does what you want it to do. The question is, does it get Philly what they really want here? And I think that might be Golden State. I think Golden State wants to get rid of Draymond Green and be like, okay, look, like Draymond has been at the center of basically everything, and he's been so great. But he seems to be kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say on a bridge burning tour, but he's been very much less than complimentary about the Warriors this summer. And I just wonder if Golden State's going to be like, you know what? We're going to move on to a younger version of you. And maybe the defensive guy that maybe you just play him as a small ball center, like many people have suggested. And in that scenario where he can be the small ball center, bring the ball up, get the ball to one of many shooters, then that could work. But the question there is, does Philly want what the Warriors would give back, which would be some of their young players? I don't think so. I think unless there's a third team involved, and it might have to be a 3-team deal, I don't think that's going to happen. But there could be something. I'm not going to say there's not something to the change of scenery theory with him. I think he, if anybody, is less inclined to kind of change his attitude. I think he might just be stubborn, and just like he's shooting with his left hand, he's stubborn. Everybody knows he's right-handed, but he's going to stay with the left hand. He's going to keep not shooting. He's going to play his game and try to get to the Hall of Fame based on what he does, and he's going to do it his own way.
So look, the change of scenery thing I think can help, but also like you don't want to be banking on that, right? Like that's a terrible thing to like hope for someone to be better. You want them to kind of have that internally wherever they are, continue to try and just do the right things to be the best player. So that concerns me a little bit with it. But man, I still think he's a good player. Again, you all listening, Hot Take Show, let us know in the comments on YouTube and on Twitter. It's at RedsArmy_John, and I'm at Nola Jake. Coming up, 2 more team-based, the Nets and the Chicago Bulls. We'll get to that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On NBA. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar out there. These things are awesome. They're healthy. You're going to think you're eating a candy bar, but they're actually good for you. My favorite flavor right now is the mint brownie. I love the German chocolate cake and the cookies and cream as well. The double chocolate and salted caramel, also excellent. So not only are these things the best tasting, and we got a different flavor for everyone, including special limited edition flavors. I got churro puff bars, which were awesome, but these things are good for you. 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories between 130, 180, only 4 to 5 grams sugar, only 4 to 5 grams net carbs. Go compare them to the bar you're eating already. These macros are going to beat them almost every single time. Plus, it's the best tasting one out there. So if you want to give them a try, go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
Football is back, baby, and BetOnline, your number one spot for all the pro and college action this season. You get the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest. I like that combination of words. It almost sounds like an anime thing. And the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor contest right now open at BetOnline. Head on over, use the promo code LOCKED ON to get a 100% bonus. Sign up today. Use the promo code LOCKED ON. Whatever you deposit, they match it. You win right away. Also, you can use the promo code NFL100 for this Thursday night game, tomorrow night's game, the season opener between the Buccaneers and Cowboys. If you lose, the wager is on them. Up to $25 refunded if you lose. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports and your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait. Take advantage of these great offers right now at BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
All right, continuing the Hot Take Show here on Locked On NBA. 2 more before we wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. All right, we've done 2 players. We've done LeBron James. We've done Ben Simmons. Here's one that, as I watched this offseason unfold, I just look at this team And I just cannot think they're going to be better than 500. Maybe a game or two at the most, but for the most part, they're going to be a 500 team, and that means they're going to be an expensive 500 team. That's the Chicago Bulls. Yeah. I don't really like anything they did this offseason. Yes, they spent. Yes, they were proactive. They paid a lot of money to guys that seem kind of redundant, and I don't necessarily think are the most complementary pieces to their star in Zach LaVine.
I can't say that this is really a hot take. I think this is actually an accurate take. I think this is actually pretty accurate. So much there are so many questions. The guys yesterday were talking about, how interesting the Chicago Bulls were going to be to watch this season because you have so many question marks, with Lonzo and Vooch and DeRozan and I don't know. I don't know how this fits. This is a real question mark. The Bulls went out and spent, which is nice, but did they spend wisely? That I don't know. Now, this is going to bring up a real question mark for Zach LaVine, who's going to be a free agent. And I don't know if Zach LaVine should be more the focus of everybody saying, like, hey, there's going to be a third. If you're looking for a third star, forget Bradley Beal. Zach LaVine might be your guy because if he looks around and he says, geez, kind of Lonzo's kind of in my way. DeRozan's kind of in my way. They've committed to this team that I look around and I just don't see it. Zach LaVine just came off an experience with Team USA, and he knows what a star-studded lineup it looks like and is supposed to act like. If he looks around in the Chicago Bulls roster and it's not clicking, he, coming off of that Olympic experience, might be like, look, I can see this going down a bad road. I don't want any part of this. I'm out of here. That, I think, there's a real strong possibility of that happening. So I am completely with you on this one. I think the Bulls could be a disaster this year.
Yeah, look, they weren't good after the trade deadline last year when they traded for Vucevic. They were, I just had it up. Where did it go? After the trade deadline, they were 12-19. Like, that is not what they made that move at the deadline for. Lonzo Ball's a nice court spacer for Zach LaVine, but he's not a pure point guard. He doesn't drive. He doesn't bend a defense like that, and he's an overrated defender. DeMar DeRozan, right? Like, you need probably more shooting, more spacing. He doesn't really add a ton of that there. What's Vucevic going to be able to do with, some of these pieces alongside Zach LaVine, who wants to drive and kick and things like that? I just don't like what they've done, at all. I like your hot take better of Zach LaVine's going to ask out before the trade deadline because screw this. That's not what you meant to say, but that's what you said to me here.
No, let's push that one.
I think they're going to be like a disaster. They just, nothing about them says above 500. Expensive, good players that don't fit, and I don't think they can put this all together.
Here's when I look at their roster, what it looks like to me. We're supposed to be looking at a team built around Zach LaVine. I'm looking at this roster right now, and I see a team that's supposed to provide space for DeMar DeRozan. That's how this looks to me. That they've built a team that's spacing for DeMar DeRozan, and it's up to DeMar.
That sounds terrible in 2021 to me.
Right, because who's the shooter? LaVine's the shooter. Vooch is the shooter. Lonzo's the shooter. DeRozan is not. So he's the driver. He's the guy who's going to attack. So everyone else is providing space for DeRozan. That means that DeRozan's going to be the guy who ends up getting a bulk, I think, just naturally, could end up getting a bulk of the usage early on. And LaVine's going to end up having to force some shots, maybe take more contested jumpers. It'll be interesting to watch that statistic this year. How many contested jumpers does Zach LaVine take? And is there an increase in that from last year? That could be a very telling stat. But and he might also have to just force more 3-pointers. That's the other thing. So I think somebody in Chicago kind of screwed this up. The DeRozan signing is the one that might have tipped this the wrong way.
Yeah, look, they spent a lot of first-round picks the past 12 months, let's say 9 months, and I hate what they used all of those pretty much on. not in a vacuum, but as a team, like, no, I just don't think this team's going to be any good, and they're going to be the biggest disappointment because, look, you spend that much money, the expectations are sky high, and they made those moves having sky high expectations. They're going to flop so hard and fall on their faces.
They might. Here's my hot take. Here's my last hot take of the day. Another team that will flop and fall on their faces. The Brooklyn Nets are going to flop and fail and flop and lose in the second round of the playoffs. That's my hot take.
Are they going to lose to the Boston Celtics?
Of course. Who else are they going to lose? What I'm actually worried about with the Brooklyn Nets is I think that I'm really concerned about an injury to Kevin Durant or something to Kevin Durant because he was just used so much. He was the only one that was healthy. He carried that team through the playoffs, played entire games, then went to the Olympics, was used heavily. He was the reason why the Americans won gold. He carried that team, was clearly the best player. He is still the best player in the NBA, I think. But there's so much wear and tear. A lot of this is going to depend on how Brooklyn really approaches this season. If they load manage Kevin Durant, if they recognize this, then I will back off of this. But if they don't, if Kevin Durant's out there playing 35 minutes a game and they're trying to send some kind of message to the league by winning every game by 30 and trying to be up by 8 games at Christmas, then that's going to bite them in the ass. And Kevin Durant is going to get hurt, and they will, I think, lose in the playoffs, probably the second round, because sure, James Harden can carry a team, but only so far. And I don't trust Kyrie Irving to go out there and play and carry a team. I've seen Kyrie Irving try to do this on his own for a long time, post LeBron, and it's not pretty. So Kevin Durant's the only one I trust to be there and keep things cohesive. If he's not there, then I think Brooklyn falls apart.
Look, it's interesting. Kevin Durant's the key to that, right? Like if they're going to win the title, it's because Kevin Durant's healthy. And I agree with you. They're not going to if he's not there. That's probably the only way I see them almost not winning a title, though. I think that team is that deep and that stacked. And I do like all three of those guys together. And, things were kind of weird for them in the playoffs last year, just kind of anyway. I wonder, and even think maybe they could, get to the finals without Kevin Durant. They probably still don't win because, as you mentioned, like watching him with Team USA was so unbelievably impressive and just willing a team that they didn't want to win gold to gold and all of that. So I'm kind of with you on if it's an injury, but otherwise this team, I think, is like cruising to the NBA finals at the very least. And like, it might not be much of a competitive season at all, but I like it. Maybe they do end up losing in the second round, and that would certainly be a shocking upset, I think, for most people involved. I got one last one. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I just want to be clear that if there's no injuries, if the Brooklyn Nets stay healthy, they'll win 70 games and they'll cruise to a championship. Like that's, I feel like I have to put that on the record because we're being hot takey, and I just want to have it. I don't want it to be like I don't think the Brooklyn Nets are good.
You don't want to end up on like clutch points where it's like Boston Celtics podcast host says Brooklyn will lose in the second round or something like that.
Which I might still. But the reason I said all that is because I am worried that Kevin Durant will get hurt, and if he does, that's a problem. So that's it.
Well, we've seen it. That's why load management is a thing. We've seen guys when they play really heavy minutes like that. Look, I'm not a doctor. It definitely seems like it increases their chance for a significant injury and like increases it almost exponentially. But before we go, this one just popped into my mind I was thinking of, and I forgot to mention this to you when we were planning out the show. Ooh. Paul George MVP next year. Can I interest you in that?
You cannot. No chance. No way. Okay.
Selling that one, huh? No Kawhi. He was really good in the playoffs.
My initial reaction was obviously what it was. But now that I think about it, no Kawhi. He tends to step up in that situation. For a hot take, I still don't think it's going to happen. But in a hot takey sense, That's not a bad dark horse candidate to pick. I can hear your argument for that. I see where you're going with it. I still think it's not going to happen, but I get it.
All right, nailed it. Nailed the hot take there right at the end. So that's going to do it for the Wednesday edition of Locked On NBA. Thank you all very much for listening. As always on Wednesdays, I'm your co-host Jake Madison at NOLA Jake on Twitter and the host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
And I'm John Karalis at RedsArmy_John on Twitter, and I host the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Thank you all for listening. Don't forget, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to Locked On NBA on YouTube, free and 5 days a week for you all, even during the off season. And we'll be back with you all next week.